might see a picture of someone and there will be 100 comments about how that guy is not actually an incel.
There was like a 2.5 year period where I didn't step outside of my house.
I'm not saying we're looking at them as potential shooters, but I'm just saying one person could go and commit Sandy Hook, the other person can commit homicide against himself. I know this sounds really horrible and depressing, but it is a pretty depressing topic.
You said earlier that incels get some things right. What do they get right? Hello.
Hello? Hi. Am I supposed to see you?
You can. Give me 1 second. I'll set it up.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey.
Okay.
Coming to you from my bedroom, so it's a bit of a weird background.
No,
Are we
fine.
live or
Yep.
not? Okay.
You said that was cool, right?
Yeah, no, that's fine. No. Yeah, I've never done an internet stream, so
Really?
new for me. Yeah, no, this is my first time ever being on the internet in this way.
Huh. Didn't you have weren't you on TV stuff though?
TV, yeah. BBC, a few of those, but not like a live internet stream thing. Yeah.
Okay. Let me move things around a bit. I wanted to talk with you about some of your I guess your opinions online and stuff. I have no
Yeah.
issues with any of them, but I just thought it was interesting because I personally like to follow incel stuff, and I noticed that you were responding to a lot of it. So I wanted to understand what your whole thing is. What's your shtick? Why?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, and about 2 years ago, I started doing all this incel research, and then I decided the best way to do it is to get onto incel Twitter. And eventually, I never replied to the main admin page for ages because that seemed like way too intense. But eventually, they started just retweeting me. So I was just like, well, if I'm going to get retweeted, I'm going to make really good posts. So every time they retweeted me, I'd have a really fair post that incels could come and see. And then I'd end up getting some followers from there. And yeah, it's been this kind of interesting situation where they know who I am. I'm in their space. I've been on their Twitter spaces. They talk to me. But they're also, they're not hostile towards me because they know what I do for a living, but also they know that I'm trying to understand them. So there's this kind of reciprocal relationship where they're trying to give me what I need to kind of make a better judgment on them, and I'm trying to kind of give them some more ideas about maybe where they're going wrong in this very kind of non-hostile situation. So yeah,
That's
how I
interesting.
got here.
It's interesting. What is so in your mind, where have they gone wrong? You said that where they're going wrong and stuff like that, because I want to see how close we align on this idea.
Yeah, so obviously there's a few things they get right. I mean, yeah. And then there's a few ways that they go way too extreme. And recently something I've realized is that they don't really believe that love exists. So the actual idea of love, they're beginning to completely black pill on. Not loads of them had already been black pilled on it, but a lot more kind of ideas of love doesn't even exist, even for the Chads. There is actually just no such thing as love. So, and why would people be in relationships? Is this real Evo psych kind of but Evo psych is fine, but in this very kind of raw, we need to have babies, we need to have the best genes kind of way, and there's no actual human companionship element there, which is why a lot of these guys, you'll start hearing them even on Fresh and Fit talking about things like, why would you need to have anything in common with your girlfriend when you can just have a best guy mate to talk about things and you just sleep with your girlfriend? And this kind of idea is going around all these spaces, and it's made me realize they actually don't believe that there's anything called heterosexual love. I'm beginning to think they believe more in gay love, to love between two men, because they see men as kind of able to love and women not able to love. But I don't think they believe in love between man and woman. So I thought, yeah, we need to talk a bit more about love. So a lot more of my posts have been just about relationships. Today I made a post about Why would someone get in a relationship with someone who wasn't the hottest person they could get? Like, if they could have got someone hotter, why would they be with someone who wasn't that hot? And there's all these like reasons that I listed about why that could happen. And that seems so basic. It almost seems kind of like patronizing to make a post like this directed at incels, but like a lot of them actually just need this to hear this and see this because they're getting really black-pilled on like the opposite of that. So
I
yeah,
feel
that's
like
the
the
kind of thing I've been
response
working
though
on
would
recently.
probably just be like, yeah, it's. I mean, they're gonna go for whatever they can get, and when they don't get, like, I feel. What was their response? I'm actually curious.
So the interesting thing about incels is they will not usually respond to me if like, okay, so they don't want to say anything too nice because then it looks like they're simping,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a girl. And they won't say anything too terrible because they also don't want me to go away. So a lot of the responses I might get will be in DMs. So
Mm.
I'll get like no likes on my post and then like DMs from incels who will be like, thank you so much for making that post, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. I wish you'd said that in the post so other people feel like they can say that. But yeah, so the
Mm-hmm.
responses to that one was like, yeah, this is really good take. I kind of get it. I don't really believe that I can get a relationship though, but like, yeah, I kind of get why other people might have relationships. So yeah.
So the idea, okay. The other thing that you were talking about was how incels were saying that, and even some of the fresh and fit were adopting the idea that like talking to men as a thing was, um, yeah, you would talk to men instead of talk to like a partner that you're in a relationship with, in order to
Mm,
get that sense of companionship. Um,
mm,
I don't know what the incels like opinion or whatever was would be on that, but I know at least for because I've heard the opinion before. I know at least for how that typically goes. It's that it's easier to talk to same-sex people because you don't have to worry about ulterior motives as much, and they can
mm-hmm,
like kind of be there for you without like having that kind of problem. So for me personally, I don't subscribe to that idea, but I do get a lot of my emotional, fulfillment in talking to with my brother, and he
mm,
has the minimal level of motivated interest to like screw me over or anything like that, and that's part of the
mm,
reason why, is because if I have
mm.
I've talked about this, and I imagine that, or I want to hear your opinion on it. Like in a relationship, if you make that person your emotional rock, your like stability, it kind of
Mm-hmm.
creates a really big issue where what if you want to break up with them?
Absolutely. And that's the thing. One extreme to the other. Like that's the extreme version of like having one person your soulmate of like, who you tell everything to versus not trusting them at all with anything at all. So like a lot of incels, I think it's so funny because they used to be a really like clear cut kind of line between black pill and red pill. And now I'm seeing all the red pill guys are just black pilled. And so a lot of the takes I see on Fresh and Fit are exactly the same you'll see in the incel world. Like this idea that, you shouldn't have similarities with your girlfriend, never trust a woman with your vulnerabilities, they'll screw you over. It's this lot like feeling that they can't trust women. And incels have had that from the get go. So like incels kind of pave the way for we can't trust women at all. And then, that idea of like if you talk to a girl about like you're feeling insecure, or I feel a bit fat today, or oh, do you think I should lose some weight or stuff like this? Or, I was bullied in the past, that she will come back and she will use that against you and like breaking up or an argument or tell all her friends or screenshot your message and put it on Twitter, which is the other now big fear factor with the whole like Jonah Hill situation.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, incels have been like talking about that for like years now. They're paranoid to bits about that. So yeah, that paranoia is definitely something that a lot of incels have, which is why if you actually go onto the black pill like sites, most of them aren't looking to date. People think, oh, they're trying to figure out how to date. No, they're talking about why they're not dating a lot of the time more than why they wish they were dating. Like, thank God I'm not dating another, like, I don't want to say the word too much, but like roasty. Like, oh, thank God I'm like not with a woman. Like they're horrible. I'm so happy in a weird way that I am like so ugly to them because I'm not like ruined by these women who would just like be horrible and ruin my life anyway. So there's a lot of that kind of going on as well. And like, yeah, you're gonna see that coming into the red pill space a lot more as well. So yeah, that kind of paranoia.
For So for the like using your vulnerabilities against you kind of a thing, I think part of the reason why that's pushed a lot is because I think there's a perception that women aren't supposed to be a group of people that do that. But I think honestly, I think pretty much everybody does that. I think in a heated debate, you're gonna say something vulnerable. You're gonna be vulnerable. Then your partner's gonna get mad, and they're just gonna throw it at you in like a fit of rage. That's in most scenarios, or sorry, in most people's lives. That's gonna happen a couple times, where they're gonna have a partner that does that. So I don't think that's like unreasonable to like be worried about. But I agree, it's like a bit of paranoia where they're like, okay, so the solution to this is never be vulnerable with your partner. But I think that paranoia is born out of the fact that if you ask like normal people, they're not going to, they're like, that's not going to be the thing. What they're going to tell you is, no, women are sensitive. They're not going to do these things. They're nurturing. They're not going to do whatever. But in reality, if you like, I don't know, give some kind of vulnerable situation, it'll probably get thrown back at you in a fight or a argument.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been through a breakup. I've had everything ever that I've said to someone be thrown back at me.
Yeah.
And I know for sure that if you were to tell somebody about any type of mental illness you have, OCD, ADHD, BPPD, autism, whatever you might have going on, that you've told them about, you've talked about, in a fit of rage, they could easily throw that back at you and say, look, it's your OCD coming up again. Like, there's stuff that happens that people will say and use against you when they are feeling emotional. And yeah, I think I don't know a lot of what incels I think is like their whole like inside black pill, red pill matrix version of the world. Like they've just found this out. Like they're the kind of conquistadors of like the truth. They found it and no one else has. Is actually just really common sense. Like the idea that people say horrible things to people when they break up with them. People do leave people for other people. People might pick a hotter person over a less hotter person. This happens all the time. And incels, I almost wonder if some of them have lived in this Disney fantasy when they were teenagers and then like have come
Yeah,
to this realization as older.
I actually think that's a really big issue. I know that was a problem for me because I considered myself an incel growing up, and that was literally the problem.
Really?
The problem was I thought that if I had a good personality, that's all that would work. Nope, that's not how it works. That's not how reality works. You need to be presentable to a group of people. You need to put yourself in those there's a million different things that you need to do. But I was of the interpretation, because I grew up this way, women will like you if you have a decent personality. That's not true. You need to put yourself in specific scenarios. You need to do specific things. How many different women I have met that have been fed that line and they don't get a chance because they're conventionally unattractive is mind-blowing. Like, it's just the amount of women that are just like, yeah, I have a good personality. The problem is I'm just not attractive, so I don't really have all these opportunities. I think that's kind of a lot of the problem, is that there's an expectation that if you essentially aren't like an abusive, manipulative person and you have your like shit together, that you'll do all right in dating. But there's a lot of like more things that are unsaid that I think a lot of people take for granted because it kind of just naturally happens for a lot of people. Like I think the development of like social skills, which kind of gets onto another thing I wanted to ask you, which is, why do you think most incels are incels?
Yeah. Before I answer that, I'm going to tell a really quick story because actually I was thinking about this, and if any incels are watching, I think this would be interesting to know. My first dating experience pretty much ever was a blackpilling moment. I was 16, no, I was 15, and I met this guy on the site we used at the time called Bebo, which was like before Facebook and kids only used it. I don't know if anyone remembers it, but we did it here in Ireland. So I met him. He was like this really good looking 17-year-old, older than me, and he just started talking to me, and we met up, and it was all going great. He was like a Disney prince. He was so perfect. And within 3 weeks, he broke up with me out of nowhere, out of nowhere. And I had no understanding why that happened. He never told me why. I figured out it was because he kind of went back to an ex-girlfriend, but he didn't tell me. But it came out of nowhere. And I remember a girl in my year, because I'm 50 and I have no idea what's going on. She just said to me, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And something like that, when it comes to you early, you're like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have thought this was my, High School Musical like situation where it all turns out okay. And a lot of incels, by not, and this is not their fault, by not having those early moments of heartbreak, of disappointment that you have to get over, they're having them later. So they're having them later, and they're having them more intensely, because as you get older, things like sex get involved. When I'm 15, I'm not thinking about having sex with them. But when you're 20, you're thinking about having sex with them. So that's just something to kind of, I think, maybe think about when you think about incels. It's not all their fault. It's more because they didn't have those experiences growing up, and now they're getting there slowly with more intensity about it. Why do I think they're incels?
Oh, wait,
There are a few
one
reasons.
quick second before you answer that. There's people asking for your stuff. Should I link them your Twitter? Is that where
Yeah,
people would
you
want to?
can link them my Twitter. Yeah, go ahead. It's mostly, incel stuff.
Sweet.
Um,
Go ahead and continue.
yeah, so why do I think they're incels? Okay, there are so many different types. That's the first thing. They used to have like groups in their own, like in incels.co, where they'd have like what they call mental cells, curry cells, height cells. I think there was hair cells. So they'd have all these different groups about why they felt they themselves were incel. So nobody could ever agree. And even if you go onto the main admin Twitter's page today, they even debate him, the guy who owns the site, over why he's incel. Some of them don't think he should be incel, even though he owns the site. So some things that they talk about include obviously height, a huge one, but also having autism, also not being white is the big one. That's why they have this thing called JBW, just be white. And then they have different ideas like, obesity or being too skinny, or I know OCD, ADHD, all these different reasons why they feel themselves that they're incel. But with all of those things, you can look to a guy who has those who's doing really well.
Yeah.
So there's like not one thing that they can pinpoint that is like, oh yeah, no one who has that is ever having sex. Like, you're completely correct. That is the one thing that bars you from all sex and relationships. There is one category of incel I haven't seen around in a while, but I will say this category I have the most empathy for. Well, two categories. Schizophrenia
Okay.
and having amputation. So like these are pretty big. Now I'm not gonna lie to anybody. Schizophrenia is a really, really, really difficult disorder to have, to live with, and to date with. And a lot of people who have it have had to make the really hard decision of not trying to date anymore. And I do know somebody personally who's had to make that decision, and it's really, really fucking hard. But with the other ones that you see more commonly, it's not like there's one thing that would bar them forever. But a lot of them have really, really small social groups. Body dysmorphia, they think they're ugly. So like, they never post photos, or they hardly ever post photos. Maybe some of them do. But the ones who never post photos always say, because I don't want anyone knowing in my real life I'm an incel. I don't want the FBI after me. And I actually think maybe that's true to an extent, but they're afraid of being called fake cell, because I think they're all a little afraid that they're too hot to be incel. Like, they might post a photo and you might see a picture of someone, and there will be 100 comments about how that guy is not actually an incel. Like, hey, you're not that ugly. You can easily get a girlfriend if you try, blah, 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 blah. So they're afraid of being pushed out of the community that they're in and ingrained in, and shamed out of it as well. But why do I think they're incels? Is lack of friends, No jobs. A lot of them don't have jobs, not in college. They're not meeting anyone. And when they were teenagers, something went wrong. I don't know. It depends on each one of their lives. Something went wrong because they did not make friends. And that's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
But they also, yeah,
So
sorry, I'm
for
talking too much.
me, I think just genuinely, I think the overwhelming reason why most incels are incels is just their poor social skills. That's it. I genuinely think that's the reason why. There's a significant demand in relationships for men to have good social skills when it comes to like approaching women, to coming off as confident and presenting in a really. I've had so many conversations with people about confidence, and it is the most infuriating thing in the world because it's this weird esoteric thing that you can only kind of feel out and vibe out, but it also is like really like bastardized and not like completely coherent. And it's very bizarre to do. Or to like argue and wrap my head around. But I think the overwhelming thing that I see with incels is a lack of social skills, the inability to do specific things. So I had a conversation with several incels, and like I even went through like the incels that commit like the mass shootings and stuff, and all of them they look fine. Like they don't, their looks aren't a problem. Like Elliot Rogers is not a bad looking
Yeah,
guy. The problem
no, he's
is
not.
his like he talks weird. He definitely acts weird and stuff, and is very off putting. Right. Same with the guy from the UK or whatever with all the like facial hair and the crazy like puffed up hair. I forget what his name is. He kind of looked like Syndrome from The Incredibles.
Pete Davidson. Yeah.
He was, when he shaved. Did you see there was one picture? He was hot at one point when he was shaved. He was like a 7, right? That is a legitimately good looking guy. But when he talks, if you watch his videos, he comes off really weird. And I think that's just like the overwhelming majority of the situation is that it's just they tend to lack social skills that prevent them from doing it. And I know that was my problem as well, kind of still to a degree is that I lack the ability to communicate effectively with like certain things. I'm like never approaching and initiating with women at all, those kinds of things. And so I'm just kind of letting life pass me by and then not
Yeah.
building the social skills necessary to be able to effectively exist in society. I think that's the problem from my perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's two types of problems with the social skills aspect. First of all, one type is how where you have bad social skills and high levels of narcissism. So Elliot Rodger, bad social skills, but he literally thought he was God's gift, right? So he's going around being the biggest freak in the world and the way he acts because he thinks he's like the shit. And then you'll have the opposite incel where he has the same level of social skill, but he actually thinks he's the worst thing in the world. So he's not even leaving his room. And because he's not leaving his room, he's not building any social skills. And unfortunately, his world gets so small. This is a really bad analogy, and I really don't mean to offend any incel who might kind of fit himself into this box, but you know the Sandy Hook shooter?
Yeah.
I can't remember his name right now, but if you look at his life, before he committed Sandy Hook, he had that very, very small world situation. He didn't leave his room. He only went online to talk on forums. He didn't have like the social skills to talk to people outside. And because of that, his world got really insular and his mentality also got really bad and his mental health deteriorated rapidly when he lost his last. He had a best friend in real life and then he had a big fight with him. They cut contact, and 6 months later, he perpetrated Sandy Hook. So you have to look at the whole like worlds of these people. How big or small are they? I'm not saying we're looking at them as potential shooters, but I'm just saying one person could go and commit Sandy Hook, the other person can commit homicide against himself. So that's the two problems we have here, and we're more likely to see the last one. I know this sounds really horrible and depressing, but it is a pretty depressing topic, and I think people don't always think about that side. They always see the anger, but yeah, sadness as well.
All right. Then you said earlier that incels get some things right. What do they get right?
Well, incels get looks correct in some ways, and some ways they get them really wrong. So, I think incels are completely true, and how we treat people is based a lot on how we show up in the world, right? So, a lot of people get really nice treatment if they dress nice. Also, if you wear designer clothes, people treat you better. So if incels think it's all about like the physical look and like the prettiness, a lot of it is to do with wealth as well. If you walk into a place wearing like kitted out, I don't know, Tommy Hilfiger, Hollister, whatever is like wool or like expensive, you will get treated differently by the people in your vicinity because they know you have money. And there's another way you can do that too. If you dress like a teenager, I sometimes accidentally don't even notice dress like a teenager, and I walk into shops, and sometimes I get followed around, and I get ID'd a lot. But if you dress your age, you get treated, or if you dress older, you get treated with more respect. But they only see it as pretty versus ugly. But pretty is so many different things, and they don't understand how prettiness comes across either. Like, they are so cruel. They can be the biggest mean girls on the internet. Incels are the mean girls sometimes when it comes to appearance. Like, they will be the first to call you ugly. And it's like, wait a minute, no, he's not ugly or she's not ugly. They're like, no, they're so ugly. But like they talk a lot about like cantel tilts or like whatever.
Oh
They
yeah,
have
the
all
cancel
these
tilts.
bone structures. Like no one gives a shit. Like, but they do. But they do. But also, I don't know if you've ever been isolated for a long enough time. Like, have you ever had periods of your life where you've been alone? Because I know I have when I moved city. And I didn't have any friends, and I was sitting in my room all weekend, just like in my bedroom with no one to talk to except for people online and friends of mine back home. When the more you stay inside, the more you look at the mirror, and the more you start to wonder about yourself. It's almost like your brain kind of does this weird trick where you start to see yourself looking uglier. And that's because I think your depression is coming in. And the more depressed you feel, the more you start like pinpointing little problems on how you look. Like, oh, I have a wrinkle here, or oh, wow, is that how my arm looks like? And then you start to like fixate on your appearance so much. So these guys are spending years on end on their own, fixating on how they look in the mirror. It's kind of a natural like catch-22. It's really hard to break out of that.
So I haven't spent a dramatic period of time like alone in the capacity that I couldn't talk to anybody. I've been able to talk to my brother a vast majority of my life, but I've stayed like inside for like 20 plus years of my life. Like I stopped going to high school and then didn't go to college. And then there was like a 2.5 year period where I didn't step outside of my house, but I have had those like extended periods of time. But I would say I actually had a kind of an opposite effect. I think when I was isolated in that scenario, I was probably the most okay with how I physically appeared because I didn't really care. The reason why I was inside is because I didn't really care about what other people had to do. Now I kind of have to care, and now it's like affects me more. Like whenever I get acne and stuff, it affects me more psychologically than it did before because I like now it's a lot more a part of my job, a part of my life, and things like that. Whereas before it's just like whatever.
Yeah, yeah, and you are like on screen for your job, so there's a lot of you being in front of people. So I completely understand that element. I think it's like if you can have a job where you're not like so on show, that probably doesn't come in as much because the idea is you go out, you make friends, and the reason why people like you is because X, Y, and Z, but nothing to do with like the spots on your face. So you don't go and have a drink with your friend and they're like, oh, sorry, I can't talk to you today because you look a bit ugly. But like, so these things go away as you find like other places to have self-esteem. Is that your
Did you
brother?
get your,
Sorry, this is my roommate.
Did you get your thing?
Okay.
Did you get the bike set up?
Okay.
Did I ever tell you you look like Boxy?
Oh my
Like
God.
in a good way. It's a
Been
good.
getting that since I was like 16.
Oh really? Oh, you're 16 now.
No.
Oh, that's thank God. Thank God. That's awesome to me. But anyway, so yeah, you
Thank
gotta.
you.
Do you see this sweat on my body? Oh man.
Are you actually sweating?
Yeah, I'm biking.
Oh,
I'm on
yeah.
the bike.
You went to bike?
Yeah, I got the bike in here right now.
In here?
Yeah, I brought it in the house.
Oh.
But yeah, you should go. You should make sure you set everything up. Sorry to interrupt the conversation.
Wait, did you have to pay for it?
No.
Oh, okay, cool.
All right. Bye.
All right. Yep. Sorry, my roommate just had to
Yeah.
try and raise you up for a second there.
Oh, thank you. Oh my God, I was stopped at the airport yesterday, and I was terrified because I did not know why. And yeah, some guy was like slightly flirting with me, but he wasn't really. But he was like airport security going through my bag, asking me questions, and I was like terrified. And he was just like, yeah, I mean, if you're single, I can ask you out. I was like, oh, that's what it was. I thought I was being softly interrogated because I was going to prison. I didn't know what was in my bag.
So wait, did he get the number? Was it a dub? The airport security riz, that TSA riz didn't work?
I mean, talk about a captive audience. If you want to flirt with a girl, be airport security. They can't leave. Like, they have to stand there. And they have to answer your questions.
That's a horrible idea. Yeah, I couldn't imagine they get very many positive responses if they try that. What was you saying? I forgot where I left it off before you came in.
Self-esteem, and like if you derive your self-esteem from your appearance, life is going to be really, really difficult. But it's so easy to accidentally do. But if you derive it from somewhere else, just about like your humor or your personality or your goodness at sports or something, you have a better chance of having like a little bit of a leeway when it comes to how you look that day. But it takes ages to get there.
Yeah, I think a lot of that actually is part of the reason why I have some sympathies towards incels in this regard, because I think there's been a very significant campaign, at least in the West, to say that, for instance, if you're a woman who's rejected by a man, well, men are dogs, they only like you for your appearance, they don't really like you for this. I don't think the opposite has happened at all. I think if a woman rejects you, you're a loser. I think that's how everybody sees it. You're a loser. Like, that's...
What?
Yeah. I think, like, think about virgin men. Nobody thinks those guys are cool. Not nobody. Like, if you are rejected by women, you are a cuck, you're a loser. You know what I'm saying?
Wait, are you saying is that what you believe, or what?
No. That's what society believes, is what I'm saying.
Okay, because everybody gets rejected.
Well, yeah. But what I'm trying to say is that I don't think society has done a good job of saying that your value as a person isn't attached to the rate at which women like you. Like, if women don't like you, you are not considered a good person.
Yeah, that's really true. Also, masculinity is tied to sex in a way that femininity is not tied to sex. So, for example, I remember reading this paper, really interesting, can't remember what it's called, and they talked about the arenas of becoming a man. So, in society, it's a bit different now, hopefully, but there used to be two main arenas where you can become a man, a boy to a man: war and sex. So, losing your virginity and going to war. So, one of those two will bring you from boy to manhood. A lot of guys who went to war in World War I, World War II were virgins because they were 18, and back then sex wasn't the way it was now. They were more likely to get married before they had sex, but by going to war they actually received their manhood, and also by having sex they would receive their manhood. So those were the two arenas, and to this day we don't really have war as much as an arena of becoming a man, but sex is very much still there. Like, if you talk to an incel, I remember talking to a guy and he had everything else in life, a good job, good money, and friends, and seemed personable. And I was like, you have everything going. Why are you so upset and fixated about this? I get it. You want to have love and like sex, but like, surely you can also just have fun, because he was very depressed, very depressed. And he said, no, you don't get it. It's like sitting at the kids' table while everyone else is an adult. Like, no matter what he did, he never felt like he could be like his age around his group of friends. Like, there was always that barrier. And I think we need to also recognize that women don't have that. Like, if you're a 25-year-old virgin woman, life is not going well. I'm not going to say she's the happiest, but she doesn't feel she's not a woman, But if you're a guy, you don't feel like you're a man. You feel like you're a boy. So that's the two differences, I think, as well between... That's why the incels get upset with the femcels sometimes, because I think there's an aspect of that femcels don't understand, and they don't like to talk about, because they're like, hey, we're the same here. I want love. Yeah, I can have sex, but I don't get love. I want love. You're looking for love through sex. They're also looking for, like, that masculinity, manhood thing, and it's kind of the unspoken about part as well.
So... Wait, I'm actually curious. Have you talked to much femcels?
Yeah, three. They're very few and far between.
Yeah,
But
that's what
three.
I've been trying to talk to a femcel. I literally made a tweet earlier about talking to femcels. I'm trying to find femcels to talk to, but they're impossible to find. It's very, very
Yeah.
difficult.
Well, Gigi used to run the Pink Pill forum, and then that got shut down because she actually got a boyfriend during that. She was the admin, and then she got a boyfriend, but she kept the forum, and now I think that forum is dead, as far as I can tell. But there's like femcels on Twitter, but they're not okay. Femcel aesthetic is a bit more of an aesthetic than it is like the incel. So like there's like if you're a femcel, you're kind of more deeper, darker. Your life is a bit more about love and trauma. There's a lot of trauma involved, but there's a lot of kind of like not to make the femcels angry at me because I'm not trying to like show them as like lesser, but a lot of it could be about trauma and talking about the trauma of sex and the trauma of love as opposed to the not being able to get it. So a lot of the my ex fucked me up, my ex like was abusive, I've gone through a lot of stuff when it comes to sex that has been negative, my life is shit because of it. And that's a different thing to incels, but they bond a little bit over that aspect as well. So a lot of that kind of, and also there used to be something called oh my god, I can't remember the name, but it was like pig hunting or something in the UK.
I don't know.
And this was like a game that like college students would play. So like guys would get together on a night out and pick like the worst looking girl at the event or the pub or the whatever party, and they would flirt with her. One guy would flirt with her, and the idea was to get her back to bed, but before he would have sex with her, like he'd like take a photo of her and then show it, and then they'd all make fun of her and be like oink 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 oink, because the idea was like, oh my god, how could you fall for this, like you're such a like idiot for falling for the idea that a guy would want to have sex with you. So that was a thing that used to happen. Yeah. So
It's
there
like
is such
something
thing
out
as
of
like that kind of thing.
Something out of a movie, like a
Yeah,
horror movie
yeah.
or something. Before like
Yeah.
they get hunted down or something. That's weird.
Yeah, totally. Horrible. Really horrible. So yeah, those things do happen. But yeah, good luck finding a femcel. There are some. They're pretty intense, but they're cool. Some of them are alright.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I want to. I feel like it shouldn't be. Weirdly enough, I don't feel like it should be as hard to find them as it is, because I feel like there is probably a significant amount of women, not like a majority or anything like that, but like a like absolute number. There's probably like, I imagine tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands across the world, at least, that have issues with finding a man to commit to them in a relationship. I feel like that's a pretty
Absolutely.
like that's not like a crazy thing, when you include the social aspects as well as like beauty standards and stuff. I don't feel like it should be impossible to find a woman, or that hard to find women who are struggling with that, but it's kind of difficult.
Yeah, but there's also a shame that comes of talking about that, and they don't exactly want to publicize that even in an anonymous way. I think also incels do this projection. I feel is really really interesting, because I don't think they know what they're doing when they say like, oh, even if we were to date like what they call a Becky or a Normie, like even if we got a girl, she would always want the Chad, so she will leave you in a minute's notice to get like with that Chad Chris Hemsworth guy. And what's really interesting is like that's literally what every femcel feels and thinks, and that's kind of a guy's like stereotypically kind of like what we feel about men. Like a man will leave you for the prettier woman. Like he'll leave you for the Angelina Jolie if he can get her. Like there is always that fear in like a lot of women when we grow up of like, you better be the prettiest thing he can get, because otherwise he will leave you, because men are visual, men are going to go after the hot girl, and women love. So like the stereotypes I think have been reversed, where incels feel like men are these like big caregiver lovers and that women are these shallow promiscuous James Bondy characters, but they're projecting a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like the reason, I don't know, in my mind, I feel like in large part the reason why that exists is just because I feel like, honestly, in large part, the reason why a lot of incels' problems exist is literally just because we don't talk about some of the problems that men have in dating, or that the issues that women put forward in dating, like the idea that, yeah, if you're a short guy, it's going to be harder for you. Just straight up, women have a thing where you are genetically at a lower threshold. Like, it is harder for you based on your genetics. Just straight up hard. Just that's what it. Like the JBW, to my knowledge, that's just statistically true. That's just racism, is what that is. It's just, do you agree racism exists? Yeah, then the JBW exists. If I was a white man, I would have more opportunities than me looking the way I do, right? And it's not only in life but also in dating. That's just true. But we don't accept it. The weird thing is we don't accept these things when it comes to women. It feels like it feels like we're really hesitant to go, what women, all races of women, because I think statistically all races of women except for black women, all races of women prefer white men, all of them. Like we have a really hard time just saying that out loud, because like it's the idea, I don't know, I think we have an idea in our mind that like women have, it kind of comes back to the, if you can't get a woman, you're like a loser kind of a thing. Women have a perfect like selection pattern for men, and if you don't, like, they're angels, they only pick the best guys, and if you don't stack up, well then there's something clearly wrong with you. And I just I think if we did away with that illusion and we just humanized women kind of, and we were just like, nope, they have weird standards, men have weird standards, then I think a lot of this, it would be kind of resolved, because it would be like, oh, yeah, I am like 5'6". It's going to be harder for me. Everybody recognizes that. That's not an issue. Also, people recognize, I don't know, it's like also the hypocrisy that it feels like publicly that we have with talking about weight versus height is really weird to me. The fact that, like, if I was somebody who can't stand the idea of being with an obese woman, if I make that public, I'm gonna get way more backlash than somebody who's like, I want 6 foot tall guys. Like,
that is true. I actually did talk about that once in a podcast as being like one of the things that incels get right when it comes to what you call that, hypocrisy. Like, there is a hypocrisy about height and weight. So, like, you know, even weight within guys. Like, I was just talking about this the other day about Jonah Hill, about the fact that he had like really, really bad self-esteem issues because he hated being called fat, even though he was literally the big guy in every movie he was ever in, and that was part of the funniness of like a lot of his characters. He hated being called fat, and it's like weirdly okay to go up to a guy and be like, hey big man, or hey big fella, or hey big guy. You would never go over to a girl and be like, hey big girl. Like, that is so like not a thing we would do, but we feel okay to remark on guys' weight, and it's like, yeah, he's the fat guy over there. You never be like, oh, she's the fat girl over there. That sounds horrible. But it's fine to be like, oh, he's the fat guy. Like, why is that okay? So a lot of it is because we have this whole idea that men aren't supposed to have feelings. So they're not supposed to, like, have these, like, kind of girly feelings about how they look. And, like, the Andrew Tate world will be like, you know, leave the feelings to the girls. Like, just get on about your day. Go to the gym and look buff. But, like, don't cry over it if you're not what you're supposed to be. So there's that aspect where you're supposed to man up and things that you're also supposed to achieve as a man. So you're not supposed to get upset if you don't have a six-pack, but you're supposed to have a six-pack. So like there's a lot of this whole like pressure. Also, by the way, you know date psych Alexander on Twitter? Everyone always quotes his stats.
who?
But he is the date psych. So Alexander, he's the guy who does all the stats around dating, and his stats get like pulled up all the time. Most recently by Tim Pool, but yeah, his recent GSS data is saying number of sexual partners in 2020, ages between 18 and 35. 14% of men, nearly 15% of men, said they did not have any sexual partners in that year. But 13% of women also said the same thing. That's basically a 2% difference between men and women. So we are going on the idea that all men and women want to have sex and have like loving relationships, unless they're nuns and monks, right? So like both men and women who don't have sex, there's something going wrong there. And whether, you know, and that's the thing, like there has to be empathy between the two people. Like femcels and incels have to have empathy towards each other, because there's like pretty much the same amount of them like going around.
Well,
and yeah, it's
so
like yeah.
The issue that I have with that number is there's different numbers that I've seen that talk about like the rate at which men and women are looking for relationships, and in the like younger age bracket or whatever, I think there's like a crazy amount more young men looking for a relationship than are young women. I think for those numbers, like the amount of women who are not having sex versus the amount of men, we would also need to look at the amount of women or men that are looking for sex. I'd be willing to bet there's far less women looking for sex than there are men. I would say that probably the majority of men want sex in some capacity, in comparison to like women. So like I feel like that, yeah, that 2% difference is there, but that 2% difference is in the wrong direction, because that 2% difference should be that more often than not women are not having sex, because in general, you know, it's with society standards and stuff like that, like there's, as well as like a great push for women to, you know, be in education and stuff like that. Women should have a lower rate of having sex compared to men, where we, typically speaking, men are gonna pretty much whenever we can, we're gonna go for it, right? And
Yeah.
so that's kind of the issue that I have. It is a 2% difference, but it's a 2% difference in, if you look at the way that society works, it's in the wrong direction. So that's like kind of bizarre.
I mean, you even said it in that talk you did with that guy who's a big black pillar, where you explained to him why like it's really difficult to have sex as a woman because two things: the shame, the whole like she's a slut and body count stuff. Also, orgasm differences. Let's be real. If a guy goes into a situation where sex is happening, 90% chance he's gonna get there. If a woman goes into a situation where sex is happening, a lot smaller chance she's going to have an orgasm. And not just because it's not all about an orgasm. Women can have good sex without orgasms, but there's a lot higher chance that she will actually just actively not like it at all. Like it'll just be gross because she doesn't know him. He doesn't really turn her on. She's not there because she doesn't like mentally like him yet. She doesn't know enough about him except for like he's kind of hot. And like he's kind of hot can work for some girls, but he's kind of hot doesn't like work for a lot of girls. They have to know more about him. Like they have to kind of feel like they have a good understanding of who this guy is he attractive, before they can go into a situation where sex is going to happen. So it's not like a case where a woman can walk down a street and pick a hot guy and have good sex with him.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and I agree with everything you said. Then why are the stats in the opposite direction? Because what you're stating is that women have higher standards for who they sleep with.
Yeah.
Then why are women more women sleeping with people than men? Because it's like, for instance, men, let's just say hypothetically, will sleep with anything, but they're having less sex in the group of people who are more stringent about their restrictions. So like, you know what I'm saying?
Because apparently 77.92% of women are having it inside of relationships. So the majority of them have a boyfriend. So most women are having sex are having sex with a boyfriend. Most women who don't have boyfriends, well, apparently at least half of them aren't having sex at all, and some of them are hooking up. And then for men, only 38% of them are having sex in a relationship. This is ages 18 to 24. So only 38% of men who are having sex in that age group are having sex with a girlfriend. So most guys are having sex with, one night stands and stuff like that. You might be like, wait a minute, where are all the boyfriends then if they're not in that age category? Because women date up. So a lot of the boyfriends an 18 to 25-year-old girl might have could be in the other age bracket. So like they could be a 26-year-old with a 24-year-old, and that's where the discrepancy comes from. But I guess from this, it's like most younger guys are having sex with women who aren't their girlfriends, and then it differs as they get older. So like in the next age bracket, it differs. So that's kind of where I'm seeing it. And most guys, it's hard out there to just have these like one night stands or whatever and like casual situationships. So yeah, a lot of guys in that age bracket aren't having sex at all.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm pertaining. I'm kind of getting at is the group of people that have the strongest desire to have sex and have the lowest standards are having less sex than the people who are not only have like at least societally reinforced a lower desire and are shamed for it. They're having less sex than that group, and they have higher standards, which is like weird. Even if we do take the results that you're talking about, which is that they're more often having sex like in relationships, well, they're having sex in relationships with guys, but in a different age bracket and stuff like that. But as an absolute number, they're still having like more sex, which is like,
Yeah.
why? right?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm all for like free love and stuff, but like I think there needs to be some things that go on there before that. Women need to feel safe, which is like huge. Like they need to feel like they have the ability to say no at any time. So like some guys, they don't know it, but they're being too pushy. So like maybe the woman is kind of into it. You know, they've had a drink. You know, they're out. It's going well. It's going well. She's kind of like hinted at the fact that she'll go back to his house or whatever, and he thinks, yeah, it's gonna happen, and he starts pushing for the door, and he's like, let's get a taxi, let's go. And this happens a lot where guys are like, great, let's go, and women then at that stage feel the push, the pressure, and they're like, oh no, this is a bit, I thought he was cool and now he's getting a bit pushy, don't like this new vibe, I need to leave this situation. So a lot of guys don't realize that they're becoming a lot more pressury when they feel like sex is on the table. And that's like during the course of a date.
Maybe this is a controversial take. I feel... Wait, are you trying to say those are the guys who are not having sex?
No, I'm just saying some reasons why sex isn't happening casually. Like why aren't more women having casual sex? Like some reasons. This is one reason why a woman who might say like, okay, like let's hook up, why she might change her mind last minute, because a lot of guys sometimes feel that like, I can't believe this is happening. I gotta get there before it goes away. Like this is a limited offer deal, and they become a lot more pressury and kind of coercive a little bit. I don't like using like intense language like that because a lot of these guys aren't, but they don't realize their actions are coming across as a bit scary now. Women are feeling like a little pressure. They don't like it. Safety becomes into their mind and they're like, shit, if I can't leave this situation, is this guy actually a bit of a, like, is this going to go badly? And like that becomes a turn off, and then they leave the situation, and then guys are like, what happened? I don't understand. So like that is just one issue. That is just one instance of how like casual sex can be really difficult for women, because the minute they agree, sometimes guys think like, oh my God, too good to be true, gotta take it now, and they become a little bit more pressury. And so that's just one example of when something can go wrong.
So I'm not necessarily speaking on like why women might be apprehensive towards casual sex. I think everything you said is agreeable with why they might be apprehensive towards casual sex. What I'm trying to say is that there is literally kind of like what the incels is saying is true. There is a group of women that are sleeping with a smaller group of men. Now, it isn't as dramatic as they're making it, not an 80-20, nowhere close. But in this case, is 13-15 in the stats that you brought up, right?
No, that's 13% of women aren't having sex at all, and 15% of men aren't having sex at all. So they're off the table.
So yeah,
everyone else is having sex.
Huh?
Everyone else is having sex in relationships.
Yeah. So, but that would mean that there's a 2% difference, where that 2% of women is having sex with a group of men that are in that 85%. Yeah, 85.
Okay, yeah.
So there is a disproportionate amount, not much at all, but there is a disproportionate amount that is having sex with the other group. And not only is that disproportionate amount coming, but that disproportionate amount is going there, and they have higher standards. So like the problem that I think is or the issue that I am having and that I see other people have is, why is this disproportionate thing happening? And for me, the genuinely the idea that I have to make up this kind of difference is the men that you were talking about that are being pushy, they get sex. They get laid a lot, actually. I think they fuck a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I think that group
okay, I was gonna say they do. They do, yeah.
Yeah, and that group of I think the group of men that are not having sex are the group of men that aren't even trying, typically. I think more often than not, just trying, you'll be successful. It's a kind of the numbers game thing or whatever, but like just trying enough times, you'll be successful. And so I think that there is a disproportionate amount of men, and I think this disproportionate amount is probably going. Maybe it's going to keep growing, or maybe it's going to stay where it's at. I can't exactly predict, but I think that it's going to, for a while, be that women have more sex, because there's just a social demand on men that cannot be made because of social anxiety. I think that there's a increased rate of social anxiety that just makes it impossible for a lot of young people to face rejection. And for the most part, if you're a woman, you can kind of just go into a public space and then people will approach you. And so you don't really have to do the approaching yourself. But even that's kind of going down, obviously, because less men are doing it. But I think for the most part, there's going to be a group of men who feel comfortable approaching women, and those are going to be the people who win, quote unquote. More often than
I
not.
mean, you have to have a certain amount of confidence to have a conversation with a woman. And sometimes, even if she initiates the conversation, some guys will just falter in that conversation. So
Yeah.
it's not even a case of they have to be the ones to initialize it or whatever. It's more like some guys literally have fear of women. They just don't know what to say. They clam up, they get all nervy. That's so normal. Like, that's in so many movies we used to watch, like, you know, and like the Michael Sarahs of the world trying to like get in there. And I think there's not enough kind of. I loved the late 2010s when I was a teenager because we had a lot of those kind of videos or movies of like these awkward guys who couldn't really do it and how they were actually quite sweet. So a lot of Michael Sarah movies came out. Superbad came out. All these kind of like cute Juno movies came out where we started looking at guys in our own vicinity who kind of met those standards of awkwardness, and we were like, hey, maybe that's the Michael Sarah in my like life, and I'm not giving him a chance. So we gave them a lot more of a chance back then, and a lot of those guys came into their own then as older, kind of in college, because they had those initial experiences. A lot of media that were showing like Gen Z and stuff, like teenagers and younger people in their younger 20s, is a lot going back to that whole like machismo trope of like Maverick, Top Gun, or Thor, or you gotta be like the alpha, and then the coming along of Andrew Tate to kind of legitimize that idea. And like it's just like, yeah, now we're being like bombarded by these like alpha males who we kind of hate, but now we think like, yeah, I guess guys are like that and they should be like that, and there's not enough kind of like alt kind of guys who were watching on movies. Kind of, it's almost like we got to see the inner world of these guys through these movies that we saw, like Superbad, and being like, hey, actually he's really sweet and funny in his own time. And that kind of gave us a window into the guys in our own vicinity, so we were able to like be like, hey, maybe he's actually quite, you know, introvert, like he writes, or maybe he does something funny when he's alone. Let's give him a chance. Like talk to him, talk to the shy guy. So I do think media has a lot to play in that too, and I'd be all for bringing that back. But guys do have to understand that they have to be able to have a conversation as well.
Yeah, in my experience, I had a lot of issues, not with so much as like being nervous around women or anything like that, but just literally not knowing what to say. Not like being nervous,
Yeah.
just literally like, I have no reason to be talking to you at all. So I don't know what to say to you. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I had a couple times where women would approach me and then talk to me, and they'd be like, hi. And I'd be like, hi. That's it. Like, I have no reason to talk to you.
Right.
I have nothing to say. Like, you're just a random person. Like, what am I going to do? Talk to you about the weather? Like, I have nothing to talk to you about. Like,
But like, what would you have done if that was a guy? Like, is
the
there
exact
how
same
would-
thing. They would have said hi. I would have said hi.
Okay, then how did you make friends?
Because we had shared interests.
How did you know you had shared interests?
Because I would either meet them in an online game, or we would be in like a similar area where in which like they would be talking about some kind of game, and I would like overhear it, and then I'd have a reason to talk to them. Something like that. Typically, that's how it went. They would be doing like I used to really like some sports, and so I would talk with them about the sports. But other than that, I just don't talk to you. If I don't have a reason to talk to you, I'm not going to talk to you.
That's completely fair. I think a key point, and that's a really good one, because a lot of incels have that too. If your interests are like super male dominated or like really, really niche, and it tends to be just a bunch of guys who like it, not saying you have to give up that interest, but you definitely need to find another one. If my only interest was like, I don't know, Harry Styles or something like super girly. Like if I only liked Taylor Swift and Taylor Swift was my world and I just only talked about Taylor Swift and only talked like people I knew like who would like Taylor Swift would only be girls and maybe some gay guys. But like I needed to expand an interest. So you know how I talk to guys? I would actually get into the bands that would have guys as well. So like when I was 16, I really liked Green Day, and I also really I pretended to like My Chemical Romance, literally, because everyone else did. But I also like joined a band. I joined a rock band where I had 5 guys playing playing instruments. I became a singer and I got to meet people through that band world. Was I good at singing? I was all right. Did I know the songs? No, I didn't. I didn't even know what prog rock was. But I was like, hey, this is like the vibe I like. I like the guys in this vibe, so I'm gonna like get into it. And then in college, I went to raves. I pretended to like techno. I actually got to like techno, but a lot of it was like kind of pretending at first, not like lying, but being like, I don't know what this thing is, but everyone seems to like it and they seem cool, so I'm going to try and get into it. And then I would kind of get into it, but meet people I like through it. So it was like, here's a shared interest, raving and techno, reggae. I joined Philosophy Society. I didn't know anything about Kant. And I was like, hey, there's some guys talking about some stuff. They seem really smart. I'm going to join this Philosophy Society.
I feel like I have that problem personally, and I literally can't grow to like almost anything that women like on average. I just can't do it.
What do you think women like? What do you think we like?
I think going outside, like being like literally just like being a young I feel like women like a lot of things that a lot of men like. They like going outside, like doing activities with their friends, maybe playing some sports, socializing, maybe going to a restaurant and stuff like that. And I'd rather like shoot myself than do that. This sounds fucking awful. It sounds fucking dreadful.
Really?
Yeah, I've done it before. I've tried it. It's miserable. Even with people that I like, it's pretty miserable. I'll do it for the purposes, now I'll do it for the purposes of building social skills, but I fucking hate it. How many times I've been to clubs? I fucking hate clubs. But it's like good to be able to, it's good to be able to like get inside of the environment where my friends are and see like how they interact and like maybe talk with some of the people so I can more naturally build social skills. But that's like a deliberate thing. I fucking hate doing it though.
Well, you went to the anime convention?
Yeah, Anime Expo.
Did you? Yeah. Yeah. Girls like anime. There are girls who like anime.
I don't like anime.
Oh.
Yeah, I went to the expo. It was cool being there with my friends. I liked the like large crowd. That was cool. I probably wouldn't have done it if I wasn't streaming it, if it wasn't for like content purposes. But yeah, I mean, it was a cool experience. Definitely wouldn't have gone if I didn't have somebody to stay with. Like it's yeah, it was cool.
Okay, so what do you like? Like, if I wanted to date you, what would I need to know about you that you like to do that we would potentially do together?
Just politics, philosophy, and video games. That's really it. There's not
girls
really
like
anything else.
politics, philosophy, and video games.
Gym is probably the most overlap thing that I have with women is probably the gym.
Okay, you're being a little sexist here. You don't think women like politics and philosophy and video games?
Not the kinds that I play. No, and then not the video games that I play. No, have you heard of Escape from Tarkov?
I don't play video games, but I do know. That's not fair. I never said I did, but I'm saying there are.
Yeah, I know. It was literally like a running meme. Hold on. It was like a running meme. I had this like made up because it's a running meme. Because no woman has ever heard of the game that I play like the most. But yeah, a lot of I agree. There's a lot of women who like video games. I think on like politics and philosophy, there's a fair number of women. I think there's a lot more recently than there was like 5 years ago, because it's like a lot more of a budding thing for women to feel comfortable doing. The only problem is that it tends to be that a lot of the women that I interact with don't like the way I engage in it. I am a very big debater. I love debate. If I can't debate with you, it can't work. If we're going to talk about politics, you need to be ready to have like an argument and then like be able to drop the argument right afterwards, which is very difficult for anybody to do. I'm not even talking specifically about women, like anybody to do.
Yeah, it's really funny because my MA is technically in politics. It's in international relations, and I went into that MA being like, hey, I guess there'll be some cool guys here. Maybe I could date one. The whole course was women, like just women. It was like 4 guys who were studying war studies, and every other woman was like there to like do international relations. So like international relations is like fully womanized now, or feminized now, but in a good way. But like if you want to meet a woman who likes politics, there are a surplus of them now, and they're all working in the UN, they're all working in Parliament, they're all doing it like on a daily basis. A lot of my colleagues who work in politics, like in the UK and everything, they're women. And they're like, yeah, they're younger women.
That
as well,
also
so.
gets into a thing where, like, do they actually like it, or are they just doing it for, like, a job or a career path? Because it's extremely common for men and women to go down career paths, maybe because of family or something like that, and they do not want to bring that home. They just want to do it as a job, and they don't want to do it when they come home. I, personally, I like doing it as a job, and I really like doing it when I come home. Not everybody's the same way.
Yeah.
And
yeah. I get that. I mean, me too. Like, I've always been really interested in politics. I always felt intimidated by it because I felt a lot of the people I talked to about it, I always sensed they knew more. In hindsight, I look back and I'm like, the 21-year-old people I used to know in college who said they knew everything about like the Communist Manifesto probably didn't, but they made it look like they did, so I got scared about talking to them. A lot of them are guys. Guys have a certain way of talking, especially if they're like into politics, that sounds very like authoritarian, like they know their stuff, and it's like terrifying if you're like a little like, I don't know, shyer to get into a conversation like that. But actually I think it's just like a style of talking, because I've met women who are very well versed in politics who I think would feel a bit scared talking to a guy about it, because like guys can be very like, you know, like you see like, you know, Destiny debating or these guys debating.
Yeah, I'd say I'm in a very similar
It's a little
arena.
intimidating.
I think I might scare off a lot of women when I debate pretty intensely, because I do. I get very passionate about debates. I scare people off because it's a rather intimidating thing. So the kinds of like ways that I engage with politics are very different. I also think that it just tends to be that a lot of women who do politics tend to be farther left than me, like more socialist. In my experience, there's way like the amount of it feels like the amount of people who are socialists, like there's a majority of them are women, it feels like.
So you're a big fascist or something, is that it?
Yeah, I'm a fascist. Yeah, 100%.
Exactly.
No, I'm a
I mean,
sock
I stayed up all last night, UK time, listening to that absolute shit show that was the Fresh and Fit with Nick Fuentes, and I was like, God, if this is the level of political discussion happening online, I'm terrified. This is poor Destiny. He really did try.
I think it's fun.
Oh my God.
I find that to be fun and enjoyable. Like I don't like that they have platforms, but I think it's fun to argue against that. That's like a lot of fun. Like Zerka, that guy's a riot. That guy is. I've had discussions with Zerka, so much fun, but.
Oh really? You're friends with him, are you?
No. But we had discussions, yeah.
But there are women who watch that stuff, and there are women who engage in politics. But I do think, like, because we're going back to the original thing about, like, if you're incel or you're not incel, but just having some issues with talking to girls, you have to be a little aware of your interests and how many women are involved in them, and, like, try to expand a little bit. Women love history. Women love talking about stories around history. If you want to talk to a woman, one of, like, a really... You hate history.
I fucking hate history.
There's so much with politics.
I fucking hate history. Because everybody, the reason why I hate history is because I've been so burned on it by people who think that they know history well and like using it to like predict future events, that it just becomes, it's just ridiculous. I think history is really, really, really important. The problem is that, there's just too many people that are like, oh yeah, I read that this happened, a long time ago, and it didn't even happen the way that they said that they read it, because they probably didn't read anything to begin with, and they're like, oh yeah, I read that it happened, and it's like a similar thing is happening now, and then you go back and you look at it, it's completely wrong. They're just misinterpreting everything. And so, I'm kind of burned on history. I hate...
Oh, don't get turned off history. It's like, it's really good. I know there's some things that like there's some like interesting political parts of history that a lot of women, I found, especially like one really great podcast, I think a lot of people in general, like women and men, get into is Last Podcast on the Left. They do like these really cool stories that have happened, like true crime adjacent to history. So like they do like the MK Ultra stuff, or they do like the Oppenheimer stuff, or they do like talking about, you know, Vietnam and the war in Vietnam. And there's like all these like really interesting parts of history. I mean, maybe not all women like history, but like a lot of them do. A lot of them love music. A lot of them love movies. I mean, look, I think like we have like there's a lot of overlap of what you probably do like and what women like, but you just have to be open to that fact and also like get into something new. Like read a completely different book. Like and
I don't read books.
Read something like War and Peace.
Yeah, I don't read books. I feel like the problem is I feel like I've done, like I've tried to genuinely have a lot, like see for a lot of overlap, and there just really isn't much overlap with, like, genuinely I think I have incredibly male dominated hobbies. I'm not saying very many people necessarily do. I think the reason why a lot of people, I think the reason why women have the specific hobbies they do is because a lot of people have the hobbies they do. Like, I think there's a lot of overlap between men and women for the hobbies that they do. I hung out with a group of people that were very nerdy guys that really liked specific things that even a lot of guys didn't like. Like even the game that I played originally like 15 years ago, that's still like Dota, that game has like, now it has a decent women population. I think 10% of the people or like 5% of the people who play it are women, which is like okay. But I don't play that game anymore. I moved on to like Escape from Tarkov, which I think is like sub 2% of women play that game. Like, I think I've only heard of, like interacted with 3 women that have even heard of that game who didn't like play on like Twitch. Like natively.
Yeah, well, like that's fair
around.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're putting you on the spot. I feel so bad because that's not meant to be about trying to get you a date. It's trying to be about incels. But it's a really good kind of case study about like that is such a normal like situation of like all my interests are super male dominated. I work in a male dominated industry. I see guys all the time. I never see women. And it's like, okay, but we're gonna have to change that. And you can't wait for a woman to come along and play Call of Duty with you or whatever. You have to kind of like meet her halfway. I once dated a guy in the Special Forces, in the American Special Forces, who was in a completely male-dominated industry. He loved guns. He loved sports and American football. He was from North Carolina. I shouldn't really be like say this, but he was an old school Republican. Now, to be fair, he was moving left. But we had a lot of differences. But what kept us together, what made us interested in each other, was our curiosity of the other. He didn't know much about the music I liked, but he wanted to hear it anyway. And then he got into it. I didn't know much about being in special forces, but I kind of got into understanding all their little like ways of talking and what they did and blah, 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 blah. Like, and it was interesting to me. And then he would tell me stories of his childhood. That's a huge one. And I would tell him stories. So in this way, you can have a relationship built, but you have to be curious about the other, or else you can't just wait for them to come along and do everything you like your way all the time. And I think some incels would have issues with that too. But yeah, it's difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. In order to have it work, that needs to happen. That's why I think I had a significant amount of issues, because I was just literally miserable doing any of that. It like made me depressed and like at moments suicidal to do anything that was like remotely close to something that was like essentially something I didn't want to do, because it was like, okay, I'm doing something I don't want to do for somebody else and it's making me miserable, it's making me depressed, I'm just not going to do it. And so I just didn't do it. And then it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like, one weird interest I have, and I'm a pretty feminine girl to, like, people will say that about me. Like, I don't play video games, I don't play sports and stuff like that. But I have a real interest in post 9/11 war movies and how they depict the war and terror. And I could talk about that for like 20 minutes.
Specifically?
Yeah, and I wrote a whole paper on it for college, and I can talk about American Sniper and Black Hawk Down and, Hurt Locker and how they all like depict the military and what the differences was and how the propaganda between that and how that made the American society feel about the war and terror and the voting differences and all that stuff that came from that. You know, that is an interest that I got fairly recently and hold, and it takes getting to be curious about someone like me to know that. So you don't know what you don't know. So if you meet somebody and you have these preconceptions, I'm not saying, by the way, you, I'm not trying to be horrible. No, I'm saying anyone. I could think that you're, I could get a misconception about you and not know something until I get to know you and be like, oh, wow, he's actually into this thing. I never knew that or guessed that. Who knows what, is behind the person. So, yeah, always giving them a chance, I think, as well.
Yeah, I think for the most part that you're going to be surprised by how accepting you can be of, like, I think for the most part, yeah, there's going to be people that if you're like interested in somebody showing and they're showing interest in a given thing, like giving that thing a fair shot of your time, I think there's a lot of people that are gonna come away with a positive experience, 100%.
For sure.
Yeah.
I have to go because it's quite late here, and I need to go because I'm waking up early tomorrow. But this is a really good chat, and thank you for having me on. And if you want to know anything else that we didn't talk about, do let me know, and I can do something in the future again.
All right. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye. Have a lovely night.
You have a good one. All right, there's their link right there dropped inside of the chat. Honestly, perfect time to end that. Just perfect time.